Here we go. Hey, we have a great show today. We are talking about, well, should you ask for the budget? That's a great topic. Now, I have a number of topics, a number of your questions, and if folks come in live, I'm happy to answer your questions too. But we'll start off with the topic of the day and get into the questions that I gathered pre-show. So hopefully we have a few people to pop in because I always like it when you have questions for me. And this is just a pop-up show. I come in live every once in a while just to share a few ideas. My regular show on the Pricing for Photography channel is on Fridays, noon Eastern Standard Time. So you can always catch me live then on a scheduled time. And or catch one of my videos when I upload them when I have a specific topic. Actually, there is a question today that I think I'm going to make a video about. I thought it was a great question. So this channel is all about pricing your photography, becoming a profitable photography business, which really is important. So we like to talk about the business of photography. Why? Because one, we want to make our industry just a little bit better. All right, here we go. So the question is, can I ask for a photography budget? Can you ask for a photography budget? Absolutely. And the answer doesn't necessarily have to come back. I mean, you can always ask, and I do actually recommend you ask what the budget is. And you can give people a range. You don't necessarily have to say, hey, what's your budget? You can start with, what range are you comfortable with? Is there a top point? Is there a maximum you want to go, or what is the range that you feel most comfortable with? You can ask these leading questions, and there are a number of questions you can ask like that will give people kind of the right or the feeling that it's okay to at least tell you. And honestly, just because they give you a budget doesn't mean you necessarily have to use the whole budget, although it is nice, but you have to be able to justify it, of course. So I like to go for a range, but sometimes in the commercial world, I'll just ask, what is your budget? Because they often have a budget, and you'd be surprised how often they will let you know, hey, our budget is this. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. However, getting that out of the way, you can then at least say, okay, well, for what you want, I can't necessarily do everything you want for that price, but this is what I can do for that price. Or maybe it's twice as much as you were thinking, and you didn't leave money on the table, and you let them know that this is how you can charge your full rate. And maybe or maybe not it'll meet their maximum or their budget, but in some cases it's very justifiable. So ask the question. There's nothing wrong. The worst thing that people can say is no, or I don't know, but you can always guide them through the process. And it certainly makes for one, understanding the full scope of what they want. Because if somebody has a really low budget, maybe you're thinking they want more than they want. Or maybe they've never dealt with a photographer before. And that is another good question to ask, along with, have you ever worked with a photographer? What's your budget? And what are your expectations of this job? These are important questions to ask while going through the bidding process, because the more information you have, the better you're going to give them a quote or give them the work that they are really looking for versus you making assumptions. Another good reason to ask the budget is because sometimes we do make assumptions. We assume that, they really can't afford what we offer. That is the worst thing you can do. There are a lot of people who can afford your entire package. I mean, and you don't realize it. And there are people who you think can afford everything and can't. So you can't judge a book by its cover when it comes to how much people can purchase. And so the number one rule in sales is always don't decide for the customer. Don't decide how much a customer can actually afford. It doesn't work that way. I mean, sometimes you're right, but a lot of times you're wrong. And you need to let that person understand the value for themselves and understand, is this in their budget or not? Okay, so the answer is yes. Ask for the budget whenever you can. Okay, here's the question and answers. section. And when, okay, this is a good question. When might you charge per minute? And I know some of you have asked me about this. And honestly, it's an internal number. Charging by the minute is an internal number. So if you want to figure out how much it's costing you to do these little tasks, in other words, you don't want the scope creep and you don't want the project to get bigger and bigger because you're doing a bunch of little tasks and not charging for them. Editing, maybe it's per minute because sometimes it may only take you 10, 15 minutes. Well, how much does it cost for you to do that little editing project or uploading or, invoicing or quoting or any of the little things that you do as part of a project? Are you covering your cost? Because that time means something. It may only be 10 minutes here, but it also may be 10 minutes over there too. So, you add 10 here, 10 there, and 20 minutes over here, 22 over there, for 7 minutes here. And next thing you know, you have over an hour's or multiple hours worth of time that you've not charged for. So understanding that value will allow you to put that into your bids. Again, it's often those little things that you don't count that add up and take away from the profitability of your business. Okay. Where are photographers? Oh, here's a question. Why are photographers paid so much? And this is, I'm sure, from a non-photographer or new photographer, which is common among new photographers because a lot of times you're in the 40-hour work week mentality and you think, well, boy, and if I could get a $25 an hour job, I'm golden. Why would I want to charge 50, 100, 200, $300, $500 an hour? That's crazy. Man, even if I just charge 50, that's double what I would normally want. Well, but the problem is you're not working 40 hours a week. Most photographers are not working 40 hours a week. And we have a lot more expenses on top of that. You have to remember, you have to cover everything. You have to cover all your insurance. That's including health insurance, which is always going up. But your business insurance, you need to cover any kind of rent. And plus, how much do you want to make overall? I mean, how much profit do you want to make? And so if you're only working 10 hours a week and it's $25 an hour or even $50 an hour, well, 10 hours, well, that's $500. That's how much you made that week. And I'm sure that's not what you're thinking. If you're thinking $25 an hour, you're thinking a $50,000 a year career. But the reality is, if you're a photographer, that may be a $25,000 a year career if that's all you're charging. And you're lucky if it's that. So there's a reason for it. There's a reason why we need to cover our cost of doing business. Okay, the next thing we have, should I require a minimum purchase? Another good question. I would say yes, especially if you have expenses, fixed expenses. I mean, we often talk about on this show being the low risk photographer. And that's one thing I like to be, is a low risk photographer. In other words, we understand that one of the biggest objections to hiring a photographer is that, one, they're so expensive, which we just talked about. And to get over that objection is being low risk, because it's a high risk to pay a whole bunch of money for something that may not work out. So you want to make sure that people understand that you are low risk. But if you have a minimum, it at least covers your costs if everything goes downhill, especially if you're using the permage pricing system. But you can say, look, it's a minimum of 2 hours, and that will cover maybe your travel costs or anything. So if someone has a 1 hour event, say that's fine. But I generally I generally charge a minimum of 2 hours, which covers all the additional costs involved, the travel, the uploading, the editing, and things like that. So you need to figure that out. You can have your own minimum, whether it's hourly or per image. It's not a bad way to go. It gives you one more just a little more confidence, and two, make sure your expenses are covered. Okay, the next question. Let's see. How do I get more business? Okay, it's a little bit off topic, but certainly within my wheelhouse. As you know, I have a show over on YouTube/Rosh Sillars, or you can go Rosh.video, and that will take you over to the marketing strategies channel. So I'm all about that topic. And I think that's valuable here on this too, because, as a photographer, we want to grow our businesses. And so anyway, so how do you get more business? And that is a whole conversation. But you have time or money, and you need to budget, though, either one, both of them, your time and your money, towards the process of marketing your company. And so some people have not much time, but they have the money, and some people don't have much money, but they have the time. And so you should apply that towards getting more work. Now, one of the things you can do certainly is remember that I focus a lot on awareness, developing awareness for your brand, for your photography, traffic to your website, driving traffic to the website, conversions, more sales, better ways. That sometimes includes pricing and testing pricing out to see what is the best way to go. And then, of course, retention, keeping the people. You work so hard to earn these clients. So you have time or money, and you need to apply them to the awareness of your company, and you need to apply them to traffic. That could be SEO, conversions, improving A/B testing, different ideas to improve the number of people who say yes, and then retention, keeping in touch, communication with the people that enjoy and like your work and champion your work, and keeping in good touch with them. That's really important. And just figure that you need to apply something to each one of those areas, and you'll start to see some growth in your photography business. Okay, so that's my experience. What are some questions I should ask when people contact me about photography? And we just talked about the whole idea of what's your budget, but there are some other things you should certainly ask, such as what your expectations. And we mentioned that before, but I think that is one of the best questions you can ask. What are you expecting? I think another question you should ask is, what are some of the images that you appreciated in the portfolio? In other words, what images of mine got your attention on my website? That will help you understand exactly what they're looking for, or more so what they're looking for, the style. And the production value of those images, what it took to create those images. So that'll give you a little bit of a sense of how to budget your photography. Of course, asking the budget is certainly good. There's nothing wrong with that. If it's a situation where there might be a deadline, what's the deadline? And I think that's probably really important in most cases. Obviously, asking when the event is, if it's an event, but ultimately, can you fit them in? If it's somebody who needs to have a portrait created, is there a deadline in which they have to turn that portrait in? If you're in architecture, is there a contest coming up in which the architect has to submit their photos? It's important to know that kind of stuff. So asking just a lot of questions in general is really important. And the more questions you ask, the better off you will be in terms of offering a good quote. Okay. What is a good profit margin? That's the question I thought that was really good at the start of the show. I'm going to do a video on that, but I'll certainly address it here too. So what is a good profit margin? A good profit margin in general is maybe 33 to 50% as a photographer. Some photographers are more, depends on your overhead. But I think a lot of companies these days, that standard, we want 33% profit. Because you're a freelancer, because it's your time, quite often you can get it up to 50% or more, even 60%. But obviously, the more profit you can bring in, that means you're managing your money better. Or you're getting a lot of money in, you don't have a lot of overhead expenses, but you have to make sure you're counting all of your expenses. Ultimately, it's all of your expenses, and then whatever is left over, in other words, doesn't need to be applied anywhere, that's your profit. And that's, I think, again, 33% is a good way to go about that. I'm going to definitely dig into that deeper, into a deeper conversation and some other ideas around that topic. So I think that'll be a great video. Maybe I can release that one next week and and maybe in place of a live or maybe along with a live. I don't know. I'm always playing around. But okay. So anyway, next time we will meet is on Friday, this Friday, Eastern Standard Time, noon. And I will be live to answer your questions about building a profitable photography business here on the Pricing Photography YouTube channel. Hey, it was great talking to you. Those of you who have questions, put them in the comments who are catching this on the replay. And as always, I appreciate all of you. Talk to you next time.